Hi everybody, welcome back to the third and final part of the Airfix Jaguar build. This is the new tool Airfix kit released in March 25. So in this episode I want to move on from last time when I painted the airframe. Got the last of the airframe parts put together and the desert pink applied. And now I want to make a start on the decals. Now we're fortunate with this particular scheme because the stencils were overpainted, so the decals for the Granby machine are pretty few and far between. So this shouldn't take us too long. I'm not going to do them all on camera, but I'll just show you how they work on a couple of examples. The decals are really nicely printed by Cartograph, and my previous experience of these, particularly in Airfix kits, is that they go down really well, so shouldn't have any bother with them. So I'm going to start with the roundels, and what I like to do is to apply a decal on a new sheet that I can easily replace. So I obviously can't replace the specific ones to the airframe, but the roundels I can. Just going to start by applying a bit of microset onto the surface. Just brush the air out towards the outside. And just another drop of microset on the top, and we'll just leave that to dry for 5 minutes or so. Probably going to need a bit of microsol as well. There's some rivet detail underneath the decal, so we'll just need to get it to settle down into those as well. One of the problems of applying decals on camera is that sometimes, in order for you to be able to see what I'm doing, I have to hold the model at a slightly odd angle, and it's not the natural way that I would normally use to apply the decal. In this particular case I'd rather have it flat on the bench, but if I did that you won't be able to see what was going on, so it's a bit of a compromise really. It's not the best way sometimes to apply them, and I suppose sometimes it can look a bit awkward. Just getting this mission tally set up in the correct position because it determines the position of the fuselage roundel and some of the other decals. So this is the sort of key one to measure out. You really want to let the decals adhere properly, because if you're handling the airframe whilst you're applying decals, you can easily just get your finger in the wrong position and either shift them or pull them off altogether, which obviously you don't want. So it is advisable just to wait those 5 or 10 minutes until the adhesive on the decal has gripped to the surface of the model. Okay, just coming back to it now, this is dried up, so we'll just put a coat of microsol over the top. And again, at this point it's even more essential that you leave this, because the microsol will react with the decal, and what you'll end up if you try to move it is like a rubbery sludge, and it's just not recoverable at that point, so you've got to be patient and leave it alone. So we'll give that another 10 minutes. If it hasn't, we just give it another coat of microsol and eventually it will settle down. Sometimes with things like these very small rivets, you could use a very fine needle just to punch through and help the decal to conform a little bit. Okay, so the decals have set nicely. Really good quality stuff that Airfix are using these days. And it's time now to just do a panel line wash, make a start with the weathering process. This aircraft in parts was fairly dirty actually, particularly around the engine doors, and at the back here near the nozzles. So we're going to replicate that. There was also some patchy markings, some very black markings on the leading edge of the fin, which was either overpainted or it was a protective layer that had worn away. I'm not sure which it was. But the first job is to get the panel line wash, and when we remove this we can start to get some additional staining effect as we're removing it, and I'll show you how that works when we get to it. So the panel line wash I'm going to be using, I've tried several, including my AK2073, which is meant to be for sand and desert camouflage, but it's a little bit too pale. I have tried this, and it's the AK panel liners are my preferred medium really, but it was just not enough contrast. So it's worth experimenting. So I've gone back to Tamiya panel line, which is a dark brown, this particular one anyway, and this gives just enough to accentuate the panel lines sufficiently. Now, because I've only applied very thin layers of paint, the panel lines haven't flooded at all, and they're pretty prominent actually. You could almost get away without doing any of this step, but it does add that extra level of contrast really, I suppose. So all I'm going to be doing is dropping this into the panels themselves, so a pin wash effectively. I've never been a fan of the school where you flood the whole airframe surface with your wash. I just think it's wasteful really. Now this step is quite a lengthy process really, because for one there's a lot to cover. Although it's a small aircraft, there's lots of panel line detail on it, so you've got to spend your time. You don't want to be missing any of the detail, because once you've got the flat varnish on, it's probably a bit too late to be going back. So just concentrate on where you are and make sure that you've covered all the areas you need to. I try and do a section of the airframe at a time. Now the Tamiya panel liner does dry fairly quickly, and I don't like to leave it on too long because it just becomes more difficult to remove. Now if you catch it at the right time, you can just about get it off without adding any thinners of any sort, but I've left this on the stabilizer a little bit too long, so it's going to need reactivating a little bit. So for that I just want a drop of white spirits on the cotton bud, and I mop that off onto a towel so that it's just slightly moistened. You don't want it wet, otherwise you'll end up removing all the wash. So that's just enough to reactivate the excess and start to remove it. So for me this is one of the first steps in weathering where you can use the wash on the cotton bud to get some streaking effects. Working the cotton bud in the airflow, and at this point the wash is so diluted that it's a very subtle effect. I suppose my thinking about weathering is to build it up gradually. I like to just do one technique, add a layer, and then just step back when it's dry just to assess whether or not it needs any more. And doing it like this in stages, you don't overdo it. And it's just a matter of personal taste. I don't like over-weathered models. I'm just going to add a couple of strips of tape onto the bottom of these stabilizers just to protect them on the bench. Don't want to rub the paint off that sharp corner. So as you can see, this step is quite time consuming, so I'll carry on with it until the whole airframe's covered. Then we'll come back, and take a look at what we need to do next with it. Alright, the whole airframe has had the panel liner on now, and I've spent an hour or so just streaking that in. The accumulation of the wash on the cotton bud enables you just to wipe along the airframe, as I said, and get some of that streaking and sometimes some shadowing effects as well on the airframe. So I'm happy with that as far as it goes at the moment. There are some other stages that I'll want to do a bit later on. Okay, so we're good to go. So the next job is to give the airframe an overall coat of semi-gloss. Again, this is a Tamiya lacquer paint. It describes it as semi-gloss, but actually it's somewhere near a matte, to be honest. And it's obviously a stage where you can go full flat if that's what you want. That's LP23 in the same range. I just like a slight sheen on the model when it's finished, so that's what I'm going to be using. So we'll get that done, and at that point I can remove all the masking from the undercarriage bays and the transparencies and tidy up the edges of the undercarriage bays as well, ready for the next step. The next step of the weathering process needs to be done over a flat varnish, and that's because I'll probably be using some weathering pencils, and they will grip better onto a flat surface, whereas the panel liner needs to go on over a gloss, otherwise it just spreads out and stains into a flat surface. So it's just the two different techniques that we need to employ in the weathering stages. So the flat varnish has dried, so we can get the masking out. This is where you find out whether or not your masking's good enough. And I hate masking up, particularly wheelbase, but it's worth doing it carefully because it just reduces the amount of touch-ups that you might need to do subsequently at this point. So I just grip my teeth and make sure all these spaces are properly blocked up, and that looks pretty good. We've got one or two areas where I'm going to do a little bit of remedial work, but it's not too bad at all. Hopefully the transparencies are the same. It's always good to get the tape off transparencies, because even though I've never had any particular problem with masking tape, I have heard reports of it leaving a residue on canopies which is not easy to remove. So get it off at the first opportunity. Because this is a new kit, there wasn't a masking set available at the point where I did this canopy. There might be one now, but to be absolutely honest, for the amount of canopy that there is on this, it's not really a big deal to do your own. So if you do get any overspray, I've just got a tiny amount that's got through the tape. What I like to do is just sharpen a cocktail stick and cut a sort of beveled chisel edge on it, and you can use that just to rub the paint away. You can also use the chisel edge just to get in if you've got a little bit of excess paint on the borders, which I've got here. So that just sharpens that up. And just to finish that off, I just give it a wipe with this, which is Tamiya modelling wax. This is a product that's not readily available in the UK for some reason. Probably something to do with the instructions don't comply. but I get this from Europe, and it's really good. It's fantastic for canopies, and you can also finish the model off as well by applying a coat of the modelling wax. And it's interesting stuff, because you would think that a wax would put a gloss on a matte surface, but it doesn't. So it's a nice step to do. It really sparkles canopies up nicely. And on paintwork, it helps to avoid any fingerprints, things like that. Not that you should go around handling your models with bare hands. It doesn't do them any good at all. So that's nice. It's a lovely crystal clear canopy. It's easily good enough to be able to see the detail through it. And I think the closed canopy looks better on a Jaguar. It's just gives you the overall shape a little bit better than having the canopy open. Just working on the undercarriage now. Once I've got the flat coat on the model, I like to get the model up on its legs. So this is the next step. Now the Airfix undercarriage is really well done, the design of it. This is actually a multi-part. There are 4 parts involved here, and it's just as well to follow the instructions carefully with this, because the orientation of the legs on a Jaguar is fairly complex, and it's pretty critical to get the 4 main wheel tyres flat down on the bench. So I've had these glued up and set into the undercarriage bay so that I can line them up before the glue sets, so they're all ready to go. I want to add some brake lines to those, but the last job I've got to do with the undercarriage is just to prepare the wheels. It's a good idea to get plenty of glue on an assembly like this, these 2 wheel halves, because you want really to get the glue to seep out, or at least I like to see it seeping out a little bit. And I'll be leaving these for a day or so to dry before sanding them down, and that way you just eliminate the seam completely. So we'll just put those to one side. So while they're drying, I'll just tidy the legs up, and we'll take a look at adding a little bit of detail with some wire just to form the brake lines on them. Now there's one thing here that we could do with fixing really. There's quite a big sink mark on the underside of the nose gear leg. Now obviously that's not particularly visible on the underside of the leg, but it's not a big job just to fill that in. So for these lines I'm going to be using some 0.2mm lead wire. Obviously with lead it's toxic, so you've got to be careful with it, but its advantage is that it's very soft and it's easy to mould to the shape that you need, and this is the product that I use. Now because it's soft, you've got to handle it very carefully, because you will end up putting marks in it if you're not careful. Right, that's enough for the various lines. Just adds a little bit of detail to them. And I'll get these painted up now, primed and painted, and then we can get them fitted to the model. As you can see, the undercarriage units on the Jaguar are very complicated, with all the various jacks and struts on them, and I think Airfix have done a really good job of those. The separate parts are very fine and they give a good representation of that leg. Now, as you can see, I've got a bit of a problem here because these are the main retraction jacks for the main undercarriage legs, and they're in several pieces. As you can see, they've broken on the sprue, so I'm going to have to do some sort of repair. I don't know if it's that I've been rough with the sprues in the box, or they were already just broken in the packaging. So what I'm going to have to do is replace this section here, this narrow section, which is kind of the very brightly polished oleo section, with some nickel silver rod, which is a good representation for that sort of unit. But I'm going to have to drill out the piston unit, this larger piece, to accept the nickel silver rod. So this is the nickel silver. It's 0.9 millimeters. So we haven't got a lot of room for manoeuvre here, so I want to be accurate with the marking out. Get it right in the centre, and I'm going to go with a 0.8. So I think that's going to look better anyway once it's installed. Time to fit the undercarriage legs now, and you can see that I've finished them off with a bit of a weathering wash just to get some grime in the detail, just to pop it out a little bit. I've also added some bare metal foil to the strut at the back, and these are ready to fit now. I want to get them on and leave them overnight to set, just to make sure that these are going to hold the weight of the model. This is quite an important step really, because not only has the undercarriage got to support the weight of the model, obviously, but we've also got to get this at the right sort of stance. And with it located, just make sure that everything's nice and aligned. Okay, so that's all in, nice and strong. And these struts here, actually, in retrospect, I'm glad that they were broken, because the nickel silver rod looks a lot better than I could have done painting that. Very natural sort of metallic look. So that's all good. I'm going to leave this to dry overnight just to make sure it's absolutely set up before we put the wheels on. Then I think the next job is to finish the air brakes, get those fitted, and the undercarriage doors as well. Okay, onto the stores now. Some of them are ready, as you can see. The pods and the pylons are all done, but just to mention a couple of little things to do with the bombs and the missiles. So you can see just one little enhancement you can make very easily is just to add a little bit of styrene onto the tail of the Sidewinder, and that just hides quite a nasty join where you've connected the fins. So I've just added that disc of styrene cut out and drilled a hole in the middle. Just kind of represents the exhaust on that. The other thing on the bombs is to add this, which is the arming vane. It's missing from the kit, and again that's just made up with scrap styrene and a couple of discs, and that's just added that nice little bit of detail to the bombs. With the tanks, I've painted these in a dark grey, and over the top of that I'm going to add some of this, which is AK's acrylic chipping fluid. It's called Airfix, it's the brand name. So I'll apply that next over the grey, and then the desert sand or the desert pink over the top of that, and then that just wears away with water just to abrade the pink a little bit. The tanks on Jaguars that were painted in this desert pink got really quite badly worn. I guess they must have been removed quite a bit during the operation. So hopefully that effect will come good when we use this. We'll see how it goes. The other thing that I've done with all the stores is to put some pins in. This is nickel silver rod, 0.8mm, and that goes obviously through the tanks in this case, and I've drilled the pylons out at the bottom, and that just provides a much more secure attachment point. I've done the same with the top of the pylon, so where the pylon goes into the wing, that's also pinned. So hopefully no more knocking stores off the wings. Okay, so we've got the desert pink on over the AK fluid, and now just want to activate it with some water. Sometimes it takes a while for this to soak through the outer coat, and particularly with the MRP being a lacquer, it sometimes takes a while. AK do another version of this fluid which is called heavy chipping, I think, something like that, so I'm assuming it's a stronger formula, but I just wanted just these little marks and wear really, rather than heavy chipping. Now the advantage of this technique is that it's actually replicating what would happen, in other words the top layer of paint wearing away and revealing the dark grey underneath. But the other technique, where you might use a sponge to dab dark grey paint over the top of the sand, is kind of false really. So you're putting the undercoat over the top and it can be obvious that that's what's been done, whereas this is completely natural. So as you can see, the technique is pretty controllable, and I think I'll leave it there. So we'll just let that water dry off, and then the next step is just to seal this in with some gloss coat. That will mean that there's no more activation of the chipping fluid, and we can do a little bit more weathering on it. I don't know about anybody else, but I absolutely hate doing stores. The number of decals on this single sidewinder is more than the rest of the airframe. I suppose they'll look interesting when they're done, but I always find them a real pain. But they're done now, so we can get them flat varnished and we'll load them onto the aeroplane. Okay, so there she is, all done, and I have to say that's been a really enjoyable build from start to finish. I've had no problems with it at all, no fit issues. The parts go together really well, and some of the engineering on the kit, particularly the undercarriage, is really nice, and the fit of the nose section and the top wing is absolutely first class. So well done, Airfix. This and the Lysander build that I did a couple of months ago have been a real step up, I think, for Airfix. They're doing really well these days, and I think we can look forward to any of the new releases now. They seem to have got into a real groove. So I'm going to get some photographs for the end of the video for you, just some nice close-ups, and I'll be cracking straight on after this with the two Tomcats. Got a pair of F14 builds coming up, one a D and one an A. So we'll be making a bit of progress with those next week, I hope. So I hope those of you that have got the kit are going to get it out and build it. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It's been a really nice build experience. So I'll see you soon for those upcoming builds, and in the meantime, look after yourselves, everybody. See you soon. Bye for now.